Welcome back, everybody, for our next presentation on September 17th for Astrology, Reincarnation, and Soul, Real Money and Lasting Love. It's my pleasure to be joined here by one of our certified evolutionary astrologers, Lydia Trettis, and she's going to speak. Well, we're going to talk about all those Pluto generations, right, Lydia?
Yes, we are. Yes. Hello.
Okay, I'm going to throw it in your lap. So here's Lydia, everyone.
Okay. Hi, everybody. And I'm in Salt Lake City, so it is 1 o'clock in the afternoon here. So good afternoon or good evening to you or good morning, depending on wherever you are. And just tell you a wee bit about myself. I have been studying astrology for nearly 25 years, and I was introduced to evolutionary astrology probably 15 or so years ago, and I took the Pluto courses in person with Mark Jones in the UK, where I was living at the time. And I, at long last, got the homework done. It is possible. A little over a year, a little over a year ago, and it feels really good to have it done. So I encourage anybody who is trepidatious to go for it.
Oh, thank you.
So, yeah, definitely go for it. It feels really good to be done, and the work is useful and helpful. At least it has been to my astrological practice. So, yeah. So I am just going to jump on in and go to the next slide. And I hope, let's see, perhaps we'll go to the next slide. Okay, Leroy. Using my arrows, and it's not moving.
Can you try right click if you can hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you, Kim. So, yeah, the magic of the right click.
Thank you, Kimmery. Okay, so when I put forward a few ideas for this this conference, one thing that goes on in my head, and I think it's because when I was in college, I graduated with a degree in mass media communication theory. So I really like looking at sort of a mass perspective on things and how we affect each other. So that's what I'm talking about today. Certainly in EA, we are looking at the evolutionary journey of the soul, and we work on that soul purpose through Pluto, by sign, by house, by the relationship to other planets, and through our Pluto polarity points. But that Pluto sign doesn't exist in a vacuum. We're also walking the planet with others who are born under different Pluto signs, and they have different individual soul purposes, and their evolutionary purpose may be different from yours. And even, people that were born in your Pluto generation can have wildly different purposes just because of the placement of that Pluto, and it's how it is in relationship to the other planets, and of course all of our cultural differences, evolutionary, whether we're consensus or whether we are individuated or spiritual or somewhere in between. Yeah, we're all swimming in the same pond. So there are effects, and just like we have aspects between our own Pluto signs and all that affect them, we are affected by the signs that come before and after us, not only by them, but the fact that we're living on the planet alongside others, having their own evolutionary paths, both individually and as a group. So for example, in most cases, everyone in your school class was probably in the same Pluto generation, but your parents would be in a different generation, possibly even your siblings, and it's likely that your teacher was in a different generation too. So even when kids are young and they don't have that many people in their sphere, they're going to be interacting with a variety and influenced by a variety of Pluto generations. So there's a cocktail of evolutionary paths, and we're here together interacting with our Plutos in a variety of signs. There are about 8 Pluto signs present on the planet at the moment, but I had to hone it down. So feel free, if this topic interests you, to go wide. But I narrowed it down to 5 of them: Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio. The Sagittarians are not yet adults, and the Capricorns will have to be addressed at just a later date, as they're too young for the purposes of this talk. So There are effects of the evolutionary path, and as Mark Jones stated in his EA course materials, the residual shadow of previous Pluto generations colors the path of the next generation, and very likely the generation after that. The sins of the father or older cousins, as it were. And we could also say that we stand on the shoulders of all those who come before us as well. Just as we start the zodiac with Aries and proceed with our soul and personality development through the signs, we are evolved. It's acting on us as well by those who come before and after us. We'll talk about the generations that we're sharing our lifetimes with, those with whom we're sharing the earth walk this time around, our parents, our siblings, our grandparents, our colleagues, with Cancer through Scorpio. And I'm going to do a bit of a review. So for those of you who have been around EA for a long time, I hope you'll bear with me. And for people who are new, these slides will just be a useful sort of recap, reviewing the Pluto generation, rulership, and polarity point, and how generations, evolutionary imperative, affect subsequent generations, and how we don't hit this a lot, but how the younger generations may affect prior generations, something to think about. And we'll look at the years when a generation was young adults. So I've got some slides to come that show, what was in play in a certain time. And what I looked at was when a generation was young adults to midlife has the biggest influence on the prior, present, and future generations. Certainly, several generations are alive at the same time, but arguably there's a time at which each generation is exerting the most sort of social influence. As I look at the work I've put together for this talk, I realize I'm looking at events that are fueling the interaction and evolution of the sign. For example, the Pluto and Cancer and Gemini generations were instigating the war with Vietnam, but it was the Pluto and Leos who had to fight it. And it was the Pluto and Leos who were inflamed by the choices of those prior generations enough to rise up and revolt. That is what makes the generation iconic, and that is what we remember, at least in part, about the Pluto and Leos. This is a subjective discussion. The examples and ideas I'm putting forth are mostly subjective, as you might feel the three most important socio-political relationship themes of Pluto and Leo were the peace protests, civil rights, and women's rights. Another person might believe they were free love, Watergate, and the dawning of the New Age. So please know that I'm introducing these general themes to open discussion and just as a jumping off point. Also, please know this astrologer is an American who strictly lived in sort of first world cultures. I've lived in America and I've lived in the UK for quite an extended period. So I hope that you'll forgive me for the purpose of this discussion that many of the examples are going to focus on recent American, British history and cultural archetypes. And there are some variables. Pluto's orbit is highly elliptical, not like the Sun or Venus, where they just kind of go about their business in a business-like fashion. Therefore, he spends far more time in sun signs than others. So, for example, he spent about 25 years in Cancer and in Leo, and spent about half that time in Virgo and Libra. The Leo baby boomers time, there are more of them. It was in that time for longer, and then a lot of people were having babies at that time. So there were just tons of them. So it can feel like a very big and, not to insult anyone, but, overbearing. It really made a mark, that generation. And we're going to look at the time frame in which the generational influence is most felt. For example, the 1960s were most influenced by the Pluto and Leo generations, and they were born 1937 to 1958. So in 1968, some of them were 31 and some of them were only 10 years old. So not all of them were participating, for example, in the summer of love in the same way. And so you need to just keep that in mind. So part two, what we're looking at personally, we will look at some intergenerational relationships, some romantic and some familial. I know we're looking at romance and finance in this EA conference, but we can pretty safely say that family of origin dynamics often affect the love relationships into which we enter. So I'm going to start off with Pluto and Cancer. And that generation was born into the Great Depression. Pluto was in Cancer from 1914 to 1939. So, for example, my dad was born August 27th, 1929, and about 2 months later, depression. So that has affected his whole life and consequently my life, just by virtue of the fact that I grew up in the house with him. They were born during or after World War I and in the lead up to World War II. So there's some World War I soldiers with their gas masks on. The years of birth for Pluto in Cancer was 1914 to 1939. It was there about 25 years. It is a cardinal feminine water sign. Its ruler is the moon in the 4th house. Its polarity point is Capricorn in the 10th house. Some keynotes just to set the stage: ego structure, emotional body, mother, early childhood, self-image, gender assignment issues, and it has the insecurity of a cardinal sign, which in AEA we look at. Because if I'm starting something new, there's going to be an inherent insecurity. Oh my gosh, I'm about to jump off that cliff. Is that okay? Well, oops, I've done it. So that's something we're looking at with Cancer. Some ideas for the evolutionary intention of that sign, from information gathered in Gemini, the prior sign, moving inward to form the ego structure, the conscious emotional body. We're dealing with emotional security and learning to start looking within for that security rather than from without, rather than from family, friends, the company you work for, the country of origin. The emotional wounding can come from prior lives. Pluto in Cancer is looking at an impossible to fill hole, needing to become whole, so from a whole to wholeness. Cyclical familial power struggles that repeat itself into adulthood until external dependencies are let go and an inner trust and inner strength is developed. The polarity
Miss
point,
Lydia?
of course, we are talking, yes.
I've gotten some requests from some of our attendees asking you to slow down just a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because you know what we've got? I have a lot of slides to get through, but we've got plenty of time. So I'm happy to do that. So the Pluto, the Pluto in Cancer polarity point in EA, we're going to look at the sign in Pluto under which we were born. So, for example, we're talking about Cancer here, and we're always going to look at its polarity point. In the case of Cancer, its opposite on the wheel of the zodiac is Capricorn. So what we're going to do when we're working on our Cancer Pluto is we're going to say, okay, I need to learn about building my own emotional security as a Pluto in Cancer. And I am going to take my bags that I've packed when I've learned that lesson, and I'm going to go across the wheel to Capricorn and learn a little bit about how to do that with authority. So in Capricorn, in that polarity point, we are dealing with emotional maturity and personal authority and personal responsibility for one's own emotional body. We take responsibility for the emotional body and karma as part of the individual's evolutionary development. We view our own emotional dynamics by becoming the wise man or woman and thus becoming at least more free from emotional pitfalls of blaming others for our emotional issues, glomming onto others and wanting them to fix them, etc. The Cancer, because Cancer shadow, again, we're talking about the shadow because that may be one of the lingering effects. Certainly, each Pluto generation is leaving a positive mark on the generations that come after. But often in evolutionary astrology and in astrology as a whole, we're going to look at what needs more work, what fuels us on, what causes us some pain, what says, ooh, ouch, what's that? Let me pull that out of my side and see what it is so that I can work on it. So a skip step, maybe not officially a skip step, but a skip step in that it's something we might skip if we don't work on the whole Pluto and Cancer lesson and we go straight over to Capricorn, can manifest in repeated power struggles in relationships. A projection of one's emotional issues onto the partner or children. So, for example, I'll just use an example. If you've got kids who are growing up in a household with parents who were brought up in the Depression, Pluto and Cancers, that fear of financial insecurity carried by the Pluto in Cancer generation can filter down through the lens of the child's Pluto, polarity point, ruler, house, in how they lead their life. It's additional baggage for that child. Gender issues, a sensitive man with past life imprinting, because Cancer Capricorn axis is about gender roles and issues. Gender identification may project his emotional sensitivity that he's had, because he's had many lifetimes as a woman, onto his partner rather than owning it this time around as a man. So that's another example of what that can look like. The Pluto and Cancer signs of the times, just a few of them I pulled. The Depression, World War I and II, the Korean War, the nuclear family, the rise of television in every home, the Cold War, Father Knows Best as a television show. Once World War II was getting over, these Pluto and Cancers were becoming adults. They just wanted peace in their time. They just wanted the picket fence and the perfect nuclear family. Okay, so I am going to move on to the Pluto in Leo generation. Here's some images. We've got some hippies dancing. And as I've been thinking about this talk, I'm thinking that the subtext could be from hippies to hipsters. We're starting in these generations and moving from one to the other. We had a man walking on the moon. We had the civil rights movement. Their years of birth, 1937 to 1958, about 21 years. It's a fixed masculine fire sign. Its ruler is the sun in the 5th house. Its polarity point is Aquarius in the 11th house. And its keynote, creative self-expression, special purpose, top of the pyramid, instinctual need for self-determination. And we talk about that top of the pyramid because we're moving from Aries, below the horizon of the zodiac wheel in the EA. We start with, we're moving from Aries. I'm here and I've got hands and I'm in the body. And then you move to Taurus and say, wow, I have a body. I better learn to get myself safe and have some food and a place to live. And then once I've secured myself, I might have a chat with my neighbor about how he built his barn in Gemini. And then I might be offended by something my neighbor said about my own barn in Cancer and learn that I've got feelings. And then I learn to deal with those a bit. And I get to Leo and I've got a body and a home and people to chat with and how I feel about those people I chat with. And that may lead me to really want to say, who am I? And I want to share with you who I am through my creative self-expression. So it's the top of the pyramid when we get to Leo. Here I am, and here's what I have to say and do and show you and create. When we get, so I'll stop there. So he's at the top of the pyramid and the apex of the below the horizon. So the intention evolutionarily for Pluto and Leo is creative self-actualization, the procreation instinct, desire for control over his destiny or her destiny, expression of the ego, developing an understanding that creative self-expression is an outpouring of inner divinity. Leo, the heart rules Leo, the heart and soul. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, guys. Okay, the polarity point for Leo is Aquarius. And what we start looking at, again, we pack our bags. I have expressed myself creatively. I've learned to be true to my ego self in how I express myself in the world. So I'm going to pack that bag, and I'm going to take it to the other side of the wheel, to Aquarius, where I might say, okay, how can I give that to the societal collective? How can I share my gifts in that way? Not just I have a special and unique purpose, accepting that so do you. Becoming more objective about creative gifts and less insistent on constant approval, praise, recognition from others, which stifles the very creative intention that the Pluto in Leo is trying to express. The shadow for Pluto in Leo, a narcissistic need for feedback, need for attention and recognition as special and unique, mistaking the smaller self as the source of the creative expression rather than the inner divine self being the source of creativity. The pride that results can be crippling. We can also look at the idea of past lives, which we do obviously look at in EA, Often somebody who's got a heavy Leo influence may have been actually someone special and different in another life, and may expect special treatment this time and have blind spots about his fellow humanity and creatures from being the top of the pyramid more than one lifetime. There can be a lack of objectivity in relationships and family life, and the great I am at the center of its world, passing down decrees to its subjects from the top of the heap. Now, I know there's a lot of language on all of these slides, and please know that they will be available to you as a participant in this conference going forward. So if you are feeling like you wanted to write a lot of this stuff down, you'll be able to look at it at your leisure later on. This is sort of just to set the stage. The effects of Pluto in Cancer on the Pluto in Leo. So Pluto in Cancer may not completely own its emotional body. So for example, a parent that grew up in Pluto in Cancer during the Depression and was very poor and hungry and didn't have enough may pass along the fear of not having enough to its children and say, don't take that risk in your life, don't move on in that way because it's not going to be secure, don't leave that job, that sort of thing, passing that along. Arguably, the projection of insecurity outward to the Cold War, the idea that we're not safe from communists or anybody else, building bomb shelters, kids ducking cover, spending their school years underneath their desks, worried about nuclear bombs hitting. The need for inner security outwardly projected to the world stage begins a cycle of perpetual war that continues today. The idea of keeping the world safe for democracy. The ego development is not contained by the individual, but is grandiosely projected outward to the idea that we own everything. If I have everything, if I own everything, I'll be safe and secure, and then I'll be okay. And of course, that Pluto in Cancer idea is that I need to just go inside and fill that hole in the donut and feel safe and secure with myself and with my spiritual life. Okay, so Pluto in Leo, sign of the times, the civil rights movement, women's movement, Vietnam War peace protests, the gay rights movement, Stonewall, man landing on the moon, free love, Watergate, communes. That's the polarity point to Aquarius, idea of living together, sharing resources and sharing ideas and being creative together, building a new world. So I decided to use a shortcut in this talk, and in looking at all of these variety of ideas, the charts that I've decided to look at is a family that most people know about, and that's the British royal family. All of the Pluto generations are represented currently alive and kicking in the royal family, aside from Diana, who's passed away. So she's the Pluto in Virgo. So we're going to look first at Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles, as she is Pluto in Cancer generation, and he is Pluto in Leo. And so Cancer, with its polarity point to Capricorn, immediately deals with the idea of security in Cancer and authority in Capricorn. And here we've got the Queen of England. Capricorn is also very much about time and longevity and structure in that polarity, and Queen Elizabeth certainly exhibits that polarity point in all of those. And of course, as a Cancer, she led right through so much turmoil. She demonstrates that well. And what seems to be going on here is that this Pluto in Leo sun, S-O-N, but also, S-U-N, this man has not been able to fulfill his role yet anyway, or what would have been his role as King of England, Leo being a king and his Pluto in Leo. So he has had to find, to get out from under the ruling monarch. He's unable to fulfill his role as King of England as of yet anyway. So he's had to find other ways to shine. And one way that he's done that, which I think is indicative at least of somewhat of the Pluto and Leo generation, is that he's very much a proponent of organic gardening and organic foods and safe food, and for many years started his own charitable trust that makes food that are on the grocery shelves in the UK, pretty much every grocery, Dutchie brand, of organic, delicious foods that the money then goes to charity. And he's had to find other ways to creatively self-express because it's not happening as yet as the King of England. And so he has to, with the first house Pluto in Leo, instinctually follow that. But I look really in her case, in Elizabeth's case, that it's her polarity point to Capricorn that he's been under for much of his life. So I'm just going to move on now through the archetypes. Next is Pluto and Virgo. And here's some images. The Pluto and Virgo generation is the rise of the World Wide Web, the internet, as something that is now very much part of our daily lives. But it was only in the mid-90s that Amazon.com was launched, and we were wondering, I worked in that business, and they were my client, and, you know, are people going to buy stuff on the internet? And, of course, you know very well now that they do. And Alex P. Keaton from the TV show Family Ties, his parents were Pluto in Leo, a little bit hippies who were going back into the mainstream, and he was very much a young Republican, always wearing a tie, that backlash of the Pluto in Leo. And the Exxon Valdez, the idea of purification in Virgo was damage to our planet. The passing away of Diana in an accident, and the fall of the Berlin Wall, and sort of the beginning, the end of the Cold War. So Pluto in Virgo, years of birth, 1956 to 1972, about 16 years. It's a mutable, feminine, yin, earth sign. Its ruler is Mercury in the 6th house. The polarity point is Pisces in the 12th house. The keynotes are, it's a transitional archetype. There's a sadomasochistic tendency with that polarity point to Pisces. It's the reversal of the pyramid. So like I explained in Leo, we go through those first five signs, and Pluto is roaring at the top of the pyramid. Here I am, and here's what I have to say, and here's how I'm going to express myself creatively. Virgo is a transitional sign. We stop and we pause in Pluto and Virgo, preparing the way for above the horizon, Libra, where Libra goes out and starts to learn to relate and learn to balance ego definition with how we join with others. So Virgo pauses, takes a breath, takes a look at itself and what it's been doing since it was born in Aries and started to develop an ego, and says, okay, what do I want to keep and what do I want to get rid of? There's a crisis of will in the quincunx to Aries, injected guilt of the Piscean age, transitioning to the Aquarian age, and the completion of an age. So we transition, these ages are thousands and thousands of years long, but the Piscean was 2000, we're moving into Aquarius. It doesn't happen overnight, but with that polarity to Virgo, to Pisces, excuse me, the Pluto and Virgo generation definitely feels the weight of those past 2,000 years. The Pluto and Virgo evolutionary intention, self-authentication. Is this me? Do I want to keep it? To do an inventory of what has been built during the previous 5 signs from Aries to Leo, and put that ego and self that has been constructed to good use, to work for the good and to be useful. Purification through lessons of humility in this life and prior lives. Through Mercury, its ruler, an inventory of what stays and what goes. What do I need to keep to be useful in the world? Maybe a little bit of my ego needs to go. Maybe I'm not the best painter, but I'm a really good cook, so maybe I could be most useful feeding people. And being in reality, being in reality about what would be useful in the world. Must remember that the analysis is a means to an end. Relentless self-criticism is not the point here. The point is to purify, become clean and lean, the most authentic possible self from which to then launch one's work in the world. The Pluto and Virgo polarity point is Pisces, forgiveness of the self, trust in the process and the path that one is on, self-acceptance and other acceptance, to allow the process to be and allow the self to be just as it is, knowing it will flow down the river to the sea to join the source, sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly. Because, of course, Pisces is the culmination of the zodiac. So the polarity for Virgo is that 12th sign that embodies all the energies and embodies the energy of ultimate return to source. But Virgo makes that float down the river, or that march back to source, by good, orderly direction, by having its feet on the earth plane. It's an earth sign, and saying, okay, what can I do with these hands and feet and voice and mind to be useful to the others that I encounter. The Pluto and Virgo shadow, self-criticism, can become an endless loop, and they don't get out of the starting gate. There was even a film called Failure to Launch, and I would say that that could be a shadow side of Virgo. That relentless self-criticism keeps someone from getting off the starting mark. They can become workaholic because the perception is they're never good enough, they're never clean enough, they never know enough to actually be useful. And so start from there, you know, Pluto and Virgo, just start. The compulsive addictive behaviors to the polarity point in Pisces: shopping, working, alcoholism, drug addiction. Making excuses because of perfectionist fear that she might not be able to achieve her goals. Projection of lack of perfection onto the partner and the family. So forever seeing the mote in their eye. I, as the Pluto in Virgo, am never perfect enough, and I can see where you've got your flaws too. So this idea of paring down, but not paring away till there's just a nub that can't do anything. Hopelessness over the state of the world and a constant state of overwhelm and powerlessness can also be a shadow side. Pluto and Virgo signs of the times: AIDS and its epidemic, the Reagan administration and the yuppie extravagance, Gulf Wars, global warming, recovery movement, rehabs really take off, you know, all that addiction. The Virgo, Pluto and Virgo purification sees them, the addiction, and wants to do something about it. So the doors of those recovery movement were wide open, and the room's filling up. The war on drugs, the .com boom, Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, and the idea of using what I know, Mercury, for something useful, the World Wide Web. The harmonic convergence, the New Age starts to become a mainstream thing. It's not just for people way over on the fringes. Jeff Green published Pluto, the Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. Diana died in the car crash. Alternative healing starts to become generally accepted. Some will say that Virgo is also a healer. In traditional astrology, Virgo can be looked at as a healer in the zodiac, and so these alternative healing modalities start coming into play. The effects of Pluto and Leo on the Pluto and Virgo generation, the shadow of Pluto and Leo being under the pyramid instead of on top of it. Growing up looking at all those people in bell-bottoms and free love and demonstration and such a sense of purpose, fighting against so many causes that were seemingly so worthy. And then, you know, to be an adult and say, okay, how do I shine with that huge group of Pluto and Leo sort of baby boomers over that Pluto in Virgo generation? How did they not just purify, but purify and then become useful and out from under that? The narcissism of free love, sexually transmitted diseases. Pluto and Virgo generation had the free love without the love. So sex in the 80s and 90s could have been seen as detached, cold, and without the social context of the free revolution. So we'll take a peep here at Queen Elizabeth and Diana. That's a Pluto and Cancer on Pluto and Virgo relationship. With Pluto and Cancer parents projecting their unresolved emotional issues on their children, 19th nervous breakdown, mother's little helpers. In the case of Diana and the Queen, there was this idea, you know, she's on the bottom of that pyramid. She was a lady, but she was not of the royal family. Yet she wanted to shine herself. She's a sacrificial lamb with that Pisces polarity. The patriarchy, the crown is still in charge, and the shadow side of that jump to Cancer and Capricorn, control and authority and the status quo. with Charles and Diana, we have a Pluto in Leo and Pluto in Virgo relationship. Here are their charts. So again, we've already seen Charles's. He has Pluto in the first in Leo, and Diana had a stellium conjunct her Pluto in Virgo. Mars was there conjuncted, out of sign, but conjunct. We had her North Node in Leo and her Uranus there. So we've got a trauma signature in EA, wherever you see Uranus or Aquarius. Got a trauma signature conjunct that North Node. So as she is trying, her Pluto intention, her soul intention is purification. Her ego and personality intention with that North Node is to shine and be on top of the pyramid. So she's got two messages going on at the same time. I am going to be the princess, and I am going to shine in my own right, away from Charles. However, I need to purify. And she had her own issues with eating disorder. She had her own issues with hiding out for some periods of time, yet in true Pluto in Virgo fashion, as she came into her own and developed her own charities, like the landmine charity, and her own fashion sense, she began to shine while she was still married to Charles and after. So I have said most of what's on this slide already. She was finding a way to balance. She had both of those signs going on in her chart, and then of course her mate, the future king at the top of the pyramid there. How would she get out from under her? And so finally it did end in divorce, you know, so that she could individuate and shine on her own. It wasn't really possible as a couple. And let's move on to Pluto and Libra. Here are some images. David Beckham, metrosexual male, very much a man, playing soccer, football for many UK sides and then also in the States. The President Obama, who is clearly from the Pluto in Virgo generation, but he was elected while those Pluto and Libras were coming into their own as a society. The Dancing with the Stars. This return to beauty and ballroom dancing and couples doing things together in gorgeous outfits, Project Runway, and all of the other reality programs that focus on love, The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, and beauty and outfits. And also during that time, as these Pluto and Libras were going through their early adulthood and towards midlife, we did have the World Trade Center, Twin Towers bombing. Pluto and Libra, years of birth, 1972 to 1983, was there about 12 years. So again, these Pluto and Virgos and Pluto and Libras, they're just half the time in the sign. Doesn't mean the effect is going to be any less, but it's interesting to look at impacts when we've got these signs. Pluto spending only about half the time in the sign as it did with Leo and Cancer. Cardinal masculine air sign. The ruler is Venus in the 7th house, polarity point Aries in the 1st house. Keynotes, working toward balance, relationship. The first objective archetype up until now, with Aries through Virgo, we've been building the ego subjectively, and now we are above the horizon of the chart and joining the world. The psychology of listening. The Pluto and Libra evolutionary intention to understand the self as seen through the lens of the other. I am this, not that. So relating because you've got the urge to merge, because that is a human imperative, but also in the case of Libra, to define the self through the other. Ooh, she does that, I don't do that. Or she does that, I like that, or I don't like it, or I want that as a part of me. So still somewhat self-centered in the impulse. It's a cardinal initiatory energy, in this case in regard to beginning many relationships, to have a variety of experiences of the self. Development of empathy, because we need to start to do that as we're relating to each other. And developing the equality of giving and receiving, and hoping to make that an equal thing at some stage. The Pluto in Libra polarity point is Aries. To maintain, so we take our suitcase over to Aries after we've been working on this Pluto and Libra, and we want to maintain the ability and focus on our own purpose and goals while in relationship to others, and hanging on to the self while being present for relationships with others. The Pluto and Libra shadow, the purification of the self-centered need to creatively self-express through Leo Virgo was incomplete, and the native may make for what Isabel Hickey called the iron fist in the velvet glove. Overly dominant, wanting its own way, saying black just because you said white. And what we look at there with Pluto and Libra is, it is, the symbol, the glyph for Libra is a balance, is a physical old school balance. But that does not mean that somebody in the Pluto and Libra generation pops into the world balanced. That's definitely not the case. Instead, they pop into the world needing to learn that, because remember, they've come from the top of the pyramid of Leo saying, here I am, and here's my beautiful painting and song and child that I've created. Then they go to Virgo and they might say to themselves, ooh, that painting is really not quite crap. And I think, maybe I'm going to try my hand at this other thing that I've developed, and maybe swirling around in some of that Pluto in Virgo self-hatred and guilt, and the injected guilt of the Pluto in Virgo generation, and need to then come into the Libra. It's a little bit popping and new, like being under, in the nursery for a long, long time, or being underground in a fallout shelter for a long time, whatever image you want to use. And they come up and their eyes are blinking. It might be maybe likened to a kid who's going to his first dance. Eyes blinking, fixing his tie, looking at the girl standing in a line across the dance, and being barely able to get over there to invite somebody to dance. So depending on where somebody is in their development this time around, maybe they've spent several prior lives working on this Pluto and Libra stuff, maybe not. Maybe they're in their consensus, in which case they're going to walk into that dance and go to the person that their religion or their culture says they should dance with, and they're only going to look at a small variety of people with whom to dance and experience. Or maybe they're told in their culture or religion that that's not okay to dance with very many people at all. And so that experimentation, that initiation of many, many relationships is not even going to have an opportunity to come into the fore in a big way. Another part of that shadow is codependency and projection, a lack of proper closure in relationships. The native, because it's an initiatory sign. Libra is a cardinal sign, and like I said before about Cancer, cardinal signs begin things. So there's often some insecurity with the beginning of things in evolutionary astrology. So they may walk into a relationship, be there for a week, and say, maybe that doesn't work for me so much, but I see that you're this and not that, so thanks a lot, I'm out. And the middle and the endings of relationships, they're not so swift at yet. And, I think that one experience that I have of looking at charts of my own and a client and studying them for the EA homework and my other astrological studies is that, the chart is not something to be used to beat ourselves up with or to make excuses. Either way, it's something that enlightens us and gives us a roadmap for where we are this lifetime. And the cool thing about the Pluto point in the chart and the point by sign, by house, by ruler, and then in conjunction with the nodes and looking at the nodes as the baseline for evolutionary astrology study and practice is that it allows me to look at myself personally, but also at the people with whom I'm sharing this lifetime. And And Pluto in Libra is just beginning to do that. So you just see so much going on in that generation of couples that are dressed alike, doing the superficial part for the starting. And that's okay, because we all are where we are. We're all going back to the same place, and the roads might look slightly different, and the practice might look slightly different, and where somebody is, it might be easy to judge them, but even if we're astrologers, we're not sitting in somebody else's skin. And so the idea of just being gentle with the study of EA and ourselves, and being gentle with ourselves and each other in this study. I know, Roy, it's right about 45 minutes in, and I didn't know if you wanted to do one of your...
Sure. Let's take some time and do a quick poll, Lydia, give you a chance to kind of relax for a minute and catch your breath. And again, this is so important. It's great information about these archetypes that become more and more powerful the more we discuss them and disseminate them. When you're going through Pluto and Libra, I can't help but think of, Kim Marie and I have several relatives, nieces and nephews particularly, that are just an encapsulation of all of these archetypes that you're seeing on this slide right here. In fact, we kind of laugh about how they, and it is about not judging, because they're so brave to get in. They change relationships, Kim Marie says, like they change their underwear, and necessarily so, for many of these folks that, just learn so much by that action reaction, that Aries polarity. So anyway, let's launch the poll. And it's a basic poll. I think we've done it before on one of our practice rounds. I don't know if anybody's going to remember it, but let's go ahead and recall it. Let's go ahead and give us your feedback on how best would you describe as an attendee your EA experiences with evolutionary astrology, and as Lydia goes over these basic Pluto generations. Are you brand new to EA? Been studying for less than a year or two? Are you one of our multimedia course students? And many people are students as they're practicing their astrology as a counseling astrologer. That's the fourth choice. And then I am a graduate of the course and an astrologer. So we have half the people have voted. And I hope you're getting a sip of water or something, Lydia.
Yes.
It's quite a challenge to hold the energy for 90 minutes. It's you're doing a great job, honey. Thank you for the energy.
Oh gosh, it's so fun, and I think that I wish that I may just continue looking at this a little bit further, just vignettes, and it's so fun to look at that lens of, okay, well, that's their generation, so of course that's how they're going to be. And then how does that then affect me in my life? And so I think we might spend the last bit of the talk when we're done going through the slides talking a little bit about that.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead.
Yes,
let's please do. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now, and then I'll get you back online here with everybody. We'll see some results on this quick poll. And it looks like, half of us are students and practicing astrologers was the greatest response, I guess. So kind of all over the board here. And that's kind of what we expected with dozens of people on the call. So that's kind of interesting. I'll hide those now and turn the presentation back over to Lydia Trettis.
Oh, so hi everybody, and so we have we're moving on through. We're already at Libra and talking about the shadow of that sign. So what I was talking about just there was this idea that as it's a cardinal sign that begins things, it may not always end things or know how to do that right off the bat. So there can be this idea that people might feel used and left, and that then is an issue, because we do look at the idea of karma in evolutionary astrology, and as we are moving through the signs and moving through our own Pluto experience, whatever that is, how much are we leaving in our wake? So, how much are we leaving in our wake there?
Yeah, always more of an evolved question that many of us ask in the individuated, spirituated states, and I guess the real carnage might happen more in the consensus state.
It could, although that said, and I have kind of, having lived in a spiritual community, it was amazing to me, people who, were pretty switched on, pretty on the path, but using, it's just that the way we operate can get more sophisticated. People can still be blind to some of their modus operandi, and so some pretty interesting manipulations can happen. That in my experience, and so it is kind of cool to look at it. I wonder if we've got, somebody who's in a consensus state in a religion where manners are really important. It may not be coming from a true heart place, the way they're behaving, but it's coming from a rules of social order consensus kind of place.
Yeah, good point.
It's I don't know, it's just, I love talking about all of it because I think it's so interesting. So the Pluto and Libra signs of the times again, so September 11th attacks, LGBT awareness with the natural square to Cancer and Capricorn of Libra. It's part of the cardinal, that square. Gender issues are implicit in the Cancer to Capricorn trajectory. And since Libra is that first relationship sign, the idea of how we relate as a gender to others, because in our romantic relationships, but also looking at how people as a society are relating to people who make different choices or of lifestyle, but also who are born into a different context that's not the status quo. As far as sexual orientation or physical sexual orientation. And so those issues really coming to the fore. I think it's obviously bleeding over to Scorpio, but these ideas with that square to Cancer to Capricorn, really important. More Gulf Wars. Starting to use social media to relate, internet dating and Facebook. So like I said, I worked in the dawn of the internet business. I was a public relations professional, and we knew, Match.com started at that time, but it was when those Pluto and Libras came needing to really, their main focus, learning to relate and get out there and relate with others. I know that I had an experience when I lived in London, and I met up for coffee with somebody from the States who was touring with a band, and she was in the Pluto in Libra generation. And she had, the second she had gotten to London, she had gone on Match.com and made a date for herself to right away. And I thought, wow, Pluto and Virgo, I would never do that. I know all about Match.com, but it was just natural for her to do that. Mm-hmm. So in that Libra sign of the times, it became just something that would be a day-to-day occurrence. The rise of the metrosexual male. It's totally okay to wear a sarong if you're David Beckham and be the ace football star of Europe, and the world. The reappearance of the aesthetic in the mass consciousness, because of course, if I am going to be going out into the world and wanting to initiate a variety of relationships, I better look good. So this idea of men caring a huge amount about their appearance, which it happened in Pluto and Leo. Sure, arguably, men had beautiful long flowing hair and their velvet bell bottoms and their beads and all of that, but not to the same aesthetic. Libra is so much about kind of air sign in the mind. What is that aesthetic beauty? And that came to the fore with the Pluto in Libra generation, Dancing with the Stars, men starting to wear hats again. Reality television also comes to the fore. You know, this is an air sign over the airwaves. How are people relating? If I'm afraid to get out there myself, Pluto in Libra, and initiate some relationships, let me watch Big Brother and see how they're doing it. Let me see how people get along. Let me watch a bunch of shows and get some ideas of how I might be able to move forward as a Pluto in Libra, getting stuck in with my evolutionary intention. So reality television and how people relate from different cultures. Maybe that's not my culture. I'll take a page out of the book out of Mob Wives or Housewives of Georgia or whatever. And then male-female singing duos like we have not seen since Sonny and Cher. So I was listening to my local radio station here maybe 7 years ago when I moved to Salt Lake City, and that would have been high time for the Pluto and Libra people, bands like Duchess and the Duke and She and Him, and all of these male-female singing duos. So Pluto in Libra. And the beauty in singing. We had, very loud, hard music for a very long time, and now soul music is making a huge, just the beauty and the aesthetic beauty of singing and looking good while you're singing and having it balanced with a male and female. Very Pluto and Libra. So going back to our family that we are moving through with charts, we have Prince Charles and Prince William. Charles being the Pluto and Leo generation, and Prince William is Libra. So we've looked at Charles several times. We sort of know his story. The Pluto symbol for this son of a Leo. Okay, so the Pluto for William is in Libra, conjunct Jupiter and Scorpio, still conjunct though. We use pretty wide orbs in evolutionary astrology. Also conjunct Saturn. So that ties him, into the Pluto, the Capricorn axis of rulership, being the monarchy. So he's destined, to be king. Look, that Jupiter is right on the midheaven with the Pluto next to it in Libra, and that Saturn of authority, right conjunct his Mars in Libra. This is somebody who is experiencing his relationships not only with individuals, that Libra is way above the horizon in the ninth house, not only in his own country, ninth house also in traditional astrology, looking at other countries, and long distance travel in relationship. So here we've got this person living his Pluto in Libra about relating, not just with individuals, but also with his people, with his partner, his wife, but also with the world at large, as it's very likely he will be King of England at some point. And the way he's going to experience that in the ninth house by really learning what is true for him, trusting his own intuition. So he may have a grandmother who is the queen, who's been the queen forever, it seems, and not only his dad, who's at the top of the pyramid as that Pluto and Leo, but he is going to have to, with all that power over his head, he is going to need to find his own way to rule his life and the kingdom by developing a relationship with his own inner truth. And then the challenge may very well be, again, back to that iron fist and the velvet glove that we talk about in the Libra vibration, the pontificating a little bit that the Sagittarius energy can do, so that ivory tower lording over. But, his dad, the effect is kind of a happy aspect. Leo to Libra, fire and air like each other pretty well. It's not a hard aspect. That creativity of his dad, like, okay, I don't get to be king right now, and that's obviously what I was slated to do, you'd think. I'm going to go out and do things that are important to me. This is what Charles did, you know. What was true for him? Well, architecture he loves. He loves organic gardening. That means this man cares about the planet, and was one of the first people laughed at him about that organic stuff, and I doubt they're laughing now, you know. So his dad modeled for him how to creatively self-express in a situation that really, frankly, has not been easy. He didn't get to marry the woman he wanted to. He did as he was told, you know, under that pretty strong authoritarian Cancer Capricorn axis of a mother. So I think he's modeled relatively well for this son a way to follow one's own truth, despite being born into this weird glass bubble of the monarchy. And that Aquarian polarity for Charles is that, you know, he's going to need to allow his son to creatively express as monarch instead of him. And Pluto in Leo is what we create, and our children are our creation. So fifth house issues do rule children as well as what we might paint or build or speak into the world. And that child is going to be the expression of that creativity as monarch. It's very likely, it's, you know, at least that's often what they say, not necessarily the dad, at least to date. And then we look at the effects of Pluto in Virgo on Pluto in Libra, remembering that the purification of Virgo is a means to an end, not getting caught up in the trap of perfectionism, that failure to launch. Over-perfectionism related to looks. So being so worried about how you look that maybe you don't get out there and initiate any relationships, looking at beauty on the internet instead of in real life. And then that leftover sadomasochistic imbalance from Pluto and Virgo, not feeling good enough in relationships, may run into power over, power under imbalances that are projected onto partners, or that partners are projecting onto the Pluto in Libra native. So handily enough, in this family, we have a Libra, we have a Virgo. William's a Libra, Diana was the Virgo. He's careful, you know, about his decisions. You don't see bold actions. He's pretty impeccable in his behavior. He rarely, never may be a strong thing, but he rarely puts a foot wrong. He's not a revolutionary. And her martyrdom in that Virgo Pisces polarity, a defining moment of his life. And look, even, you know, somebody kindly on the internet put these two pictures together, that expression of, you know, that's not a relaxed expression, that's, you know, that's an expression of someone who's thinking pretty hard before they speak, before they act. But also, you know, that woman, Princess Diana, did a lot of service. In fact, once she passed away and Mother Teresa passed away, their photographs were put one next to the other of an idea of love in action. And Virgo is so much that, good, orderly direction. You know, an idea of God can be good, orderly direction. And Diana came out from under some pretty heavy Pluto and Virgo stuff, Piscean age conditioning, injected guilt, all that stuff that comes with being a Pluto and Virgo, and she did some very good works in her short lifetime. And her children did not forget that legacy, and William certainly did not, or that example that she gave to him. So the idea of service now, William could very well end up ninth house traditionally in traditional astrology, being about teaching and higher learning. It could very well be possible that he teaches by example as a monarch, but it could very well be possible, you know, that in his work as a prince and a king and work in the military, that he helps to teach people. And that what was modeled for him by his mother about how to behave and how to get by in really, really tricky public circumstances under a lens. So not only was Diana working her Pluto and Virgo purification on her own behind closed doors, she was doing it behind the lens of the whole world. And part of her legacy to her son is modeling for him, boy, this is not easy the way we are under a microscope, and let me show you a little bit how to do it with grace. And maybe not always with ease, but with grace. And of course, so much of what I'm saying today is so purely subjective. You know, the cool thing about astrology and the cool thing about evolutionary astrology is that, you know, there are certain premises that we accept to be true, certainly. But then each astrologer has their own eye for how they may interpret something. So we've heard the Arthur story, for example, another, you know, maybe mythical king of England, maybe not, many, many times, many, many ways. But every time somebody tells it, I, for one, want to hear about it again. I want to see what that person's take on it is. So as you're working on, you know, if you're a student of evolutionary astrology, you know, and you're working on it, it'll be fun to just watch what your own voice as an evolutionary astrologer may be. We each have a special note to sing in this world. And as astrologers, our own take, you know, you turn something just a little bit, the whole picture is different. And conveniently, we have a Libra and a Libra, Catherine and William. Libras express themselves through their relationship. And, you know, he was the future king, so he didn't fool around. He didn't want to put a foot wrong and have a ton of different relationships, which maybe the second son can do. But he certainly waited and was careful about who he married. That Virgo shadow, perhaps, of wanting to get it right, a carryover from his mother. And they are very much a team. There is a mutual affection there, and I love this picture of them in street clothes. That is, you know, pretty joyful photograph. It's certainly posed, but those are two people who really have each other's back and want to be together. And so this idea of Libra, that Pluto and Libra generation, you know, below the horizon, we need to develop our own thing and stand on our own two legs. And that Libra coming up above is like, okay, wow, I am going to join, and I am going to be with somebody who has me. So here they are. And I think it's fun to look at her chart for a sec. And you know what's weird is I could not find, and that window is sort of in the way of it. Hang on a sec. I could not find her birth time. So I went with the zero, or the one that the internet pulled for me, basically, because I could not find her birth time. If anyone's got it, I'd love to hear about it. But here, we've got her Pluto in Libra, and also similar to William, but in a closer orb. Her Pluto is also conjunct that Saturn. And her south node is in the 10th house, conjunct her sun in Capricorn. So my opinion on this chart with this woman is that she has been in a position of power in recent past lives, and that she knows the drill on how to be a person of power, possibly as a king herself in her own right, or someone at least who ruled the roost and knows how to do that. So it's kind of cool, you know, her north node down there in the 4th house. So here, this lifetime for her, it's learning about, wow, how to deal with her emotional body, because she could very well have been an army general. You know, we come up with stories as we're looking in EA at people's charts. And so the one that pops off the top of my head is, this is a woman who has experience with places of authority. And isn't that great? Because she comes with that authority. She seems quite at ease with the media. That's a really wonderful thing, to be the wife and future consort of the king, to have that past life experience. Really useful. And yeah, so That's so far, they haven't been married long, but we'll see. And of course, she's a mom already, so she's learning how to do that. And it's very likely that she might have been spending a lot of time on the battlefield in past lives. And this time she's going to learn how to be a mom, but also maybe share with William how to be an authority and how one can do that with grace. Okay, so we're going to move on to the Pluto and Scorpios. And here, now that we're at the Pluto and Scorpios, we could probably just use icons and not use even a photograph anymore. We've got a Lego with the equality. We've got Facebook, got someone taking their own picture, and or at least living in their phone. And we've got those melting ice caps. Pluto and Scorpio, the years of birth, 1983 to 1995, about 12 years again. It's a fixed feminine water sign. Ruler is Pluto in the 8th house, and the polarity point is Taurus in the 2nd house. The keynotes are psychology of consciousness, marriage and consummation, soul, shared resources, power, the occult, sex, ritual, power over, metamorphosis, and the inherent insecurity of moving to source, who we are and who we are not. The evolutionary intention, empowerment of the soul, experiencing limitations which show us where we begin and end. The limitations are then transformed to allow for expansion of the self. This is an ongoing process for Pluto and Scorpio that does butt up against fear of transformation. On one hand, you want the return to source, and on the other, the fear of going towards source triggers massive insecurity. Use of information and symbols to expand experience of power. You see that on that last slide. Learning to make appropriate choices, including who to commit to. Where Libra was making lots of relationships to say, I am this and not that, for Pluto, it means something. Who I am dating and who I am choosing to partner with, to have sex with, has to mean something, because then we come to the understanding in EA, this idea that the people that we join with on that deep marriage level, consummation level, because Scorpio is consummation. Libra we could look at as dating and relationships with other people, not just love partners. But Scorpio is about love partners and sexual partners and marriage, commitment, empowerment of self and others, holding space for others to evolve, right use of willpower to move away from compulsive, obsessive behavior in relationships. Right use of will can mean moving towards spirit. Is this a choice moving you closer to source or further away from source? Sacred sex and soulmates as a way to get closer to source, even though we might forget that in the heat of the moment, but that's where we're going. Metamorphosis, becoming an entirely different being through evolutionary work. One man's trash is another's savior, recycling for the greater good. The polarity point? Yes.
I do have somebody who wants to speak. I had asked the audience if they knew of any birth time for Catherine. I don't know if this is what she wants, but I'm going to unmute Terry Z.
Okay.
Terry?
What?
Did you raise your hand?
No, I am so sorry. I actually tried to lower my hand.
I think that's a good point. I think it just toggles on and off, and so I think you can just press the button, the little hand yourself again, and it should toggle it off.
Well, it says, is it off?
Did it do it? Did it do it? Hold on. Yes, it came off, honey. All right, I'm going to mute you.
Okay, all right, now I get how this works. Excuse me.
Hey, everybody else learned too.
Thank you.
All right, Miss Lydia.
Okay. Oh, I was thinking, and yeah, so I would be interested in that chart at some point, but the polarity point is Taurus. So we learn to maintain our personal center while experiencing deeper and more meaningful and transformative relationships. So we take that suitcase of, you know, how to transform and how to share resources with others, which is very Scorpionic. And then we go back to the Taurus of, okay, how do I deal with my own resources? Knowing that if I need to go out and get some help, I can, but that I can also be somewhat self-sufficient. Getting out of that frog in the, not just being the frog in the well of Taurus, but if you need to be in the well a little bit and you need to focus on something just yourself, that you can do that too. The Taurus polarity point balances the lower nature of Scorpio's potential for obsession, compulsion, power over the other. And sacred sex with self allows for sacred union with the other and allows connection with source. So this idea that we can merge, but we're okay on our own. We can have a partner, we can have deep, meaningful relationships, but if we need to do some personal growth and some time on our own to be individual, we can do that too in that polarity point. The Scorpio shadow, obsessive, jealous, manipulative, secretive, evil and truth, and those big, big questions. Refusal, fear of transformation while desperate for transformation. Doing anything to anyone to feel secure. Power over. Fear of commitment, staying involved as long as needs are met and moving on. The relationship is really with source. The fear is being consumed by source. The evasion of that willingness to metamorphose in order to get closer to source can cause roadblocks to evolution. There is inherent insecurity with Scorpio. And I loved the talk this morning, you know, the reminder that Pluto is wearing his invisibility helmet. And Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio. So, of course, Pluto in Scorpio is insecure about making that move. He can't even see the person that's telling him to move, you know, and transform. So, boy, that's a tricky situation to be in. Getting stuck in taboos without using them to explore unity with source. Pluto and Scorpio, signs of the times. These natives are just starting to take the helm. Environmental awareness, despair about the environment and the state of affairs in the world, but it does lead to strength and activism. I have got to change something. Gay marriage and equality in marriage, equal relationship, and marriage ruled by Scorpio. Climate change, earth change as irrefutable reality. Social media used for power, awareness, activism, and real change. So in Pluto, in Libra, we were using it, you know, to get to know each other, to figure out how to use Facebook, to make friends. And now, as the Pluto and Scorpios are really coming into their own, man, the news outlets are using Twitter feeds as more reliable sources than their own reporters, and so is the general populace, much of the general populace. So that is pretty cool. Social media used for power, awareness, activism, and real change. A woman's rights over her own body, at least in this country. I know in other countries, some of those rights that we've actually had for quite some time, or people are wanting to take those away again. So there's power struggles over our own sexuality, very Scorpionic issues. The patriarchy hanging on for dear life. Religions and political attempts to overpower and control women. Power struggles, corporations versus the individual human. So in the United States, at least, corporations have been given citizen status, voting rights almost as citizens. And the Pluto and Scorpio generation are the ones who are kind of working on dealing with that stuff. And then I haven't mentioned it at all, but just this idea of the gun culture, the rampant daily gun violence. So even though the Columbine massacre, for example, happened during, the Pluto and Libra generations rise as young adults, just this daily saturation of the gun culture in America anyway, leading to huge public outcry, again, is happening as these Pluto and Scorpios are coming into their own. Okay, so we look at the Pluto and Leo on Pluto in Scorpio. This is a square. You have the friction of the peacock and the eagle. So the Leo being a little bit like a peacock, eagle being one of the symbols in traditional astrology of the Scorpio, the lowest being the scorpion, middle being the eagle, and then the last being the phoenix diving into the ashes. The Leo wants to be seen and recognized. The Scorpio wants to delve in and understand. Its energy is secretive. The Leo's energy is much more up right in your face. The Scorpio is looking at the deeper meaning of things and doesn't need constant recognition for emotional security. The Leo doesn't understand that the Pluto in Scorpio is much more self-contained. It has its tribe, it has its smartphone, it needs to prove in a flamboyant way. This can inflame the Pluto and Leo. So we're going to look at Prince Charles and Harry. And he, even though he's so close in age to his brother, he is in the Scorpio generation. And boy, is his behavior different. Now, granted, he is the second son, much less likely to be the king, doesn't need to mind his P's and Q's quite as much as his brother does. But he has really kind of pushed boundaries, transforms. He in his own lifetime has presented very different personalities. He's a good military man. He follows the family in playing polo and playing sport and showing up for family events. Yet it would make tabloid front page news in the UK when he would dress as an SS officer going to a costume party. So that darker side with the tongue firmly in the cheek, let's see what kind of reaction I can get by using the most horrific taboo in England, dressing up as a German officer. Never mind the Holocaust and the rest of it, also horrific. But that, in the UK, that is still even more of an outrageous thing, I feel safe in saying, thing to do. So he pushes the taboos of the boundary and no doubt incenses his dad in that way. You can see that there would be more friction between this Pluto in Leo generation and that of his brothers. The effects of Pluto in Virgo and Pluto in Scorpio, it's more harmonious. Earth and water get on pretty well. A sextile, the Virgo analyzes in depth and sometimes is frozen. The left brain endlessly seeking answers and perfection. The Scorpio psychologically seeks in depth in a more right brain way, then metamorphoses. The polarity point of Virgo is attractive and repellent to the dual nature of Scorpio because, like we said, the polarity point of Virgo is the be-all and end-all, the alpha and omega. It's Pisces. And that is that scary place for the Scorpio to need to embark on the journey toward. But it will be dancing with the Piscean nature for wholeness. My whole caterpillar may become a whole butterfly much as I want to. I cannot stay a caterpillar, Can't do it. So you've got Diana and Harry looking at each other, and we've got, like his brother, he's also got this signature of the ninth house. Both of them needing to find their own truth in a place where they're probably being barraged with other people's truths. And that idea that their mother held on to her own as she peeled away layers of what was, what is me, what isn't me, who am I, who aren't I? He can hold that in that deep, he may appear on the surface to somebody who's playing a lot of games and a bit Jack the Lad, but no doubt Pluto and Scorpio cannot be somebody who is underestimated. And the depth of his probing, I think, will probably reveal itself in time. Again, I liked what I heard this morning about the idea that, Uranus, Pluto, these outer planets, this is a long game. This isn't the short game. This is the long game. So the effects of Pluto and Libra on Pluto and Scorpio, overdependence on phones and social media rather than true interaction. Looking good, it may be more important than substance, and substance is super important to probing Scorpio. Clothes, makeup, hair, status symbols, and I'll just say quickly to you, because I know I'm pushing my time limit here. I have a dear friend who is firmly in the Pluto in Scorpio generation. He always looks perfect. He spilled some coffee on his shirt one day when he was at work, and he went out at lunch and went to H&M and bought a whole new outfit and returned proudly to work. And I thought, isn't that interesting? That is so the Pluto in Libra effect in daily life on a Pluto in Scorpio person. Right there, I think about it frequently. Food labels are saying natural, healthy, good for you, telling people what they want to hear, which can be a downside of Libra. I want to learn to be charming so I can attract people into my sphere. I might tell them what they want to hear. Air sign. Unresolved attachments from this or prior lives lead to obsessive relationships, and the need to care and be cared for by others rather than getting some autonomy. So last slide. Clearly a broad topic. I hope that it's something that's tipped off some ideas, and we can look at so many permutations. And so I invite you to do that. And if anybody wants to get back to me on what they've found, I'd love to hear it. I just hope it'll be fun to look with a new eye on the people you encounter in your life and in the media, in person and as groups. And wow, what Pluto generation are they? And how does that affect me? And, you know, really looking at the actual nitty-gritty aspect and degrees to go even deeper with it. Am I willing to dive a bit deeper? Because I've got a Pluto and Scorpio in my life, for example. So thank you so much for your attention and presence. I apologize for the speed at the beginning. It's my first time at one of these, but I've enjoyed it. I hope it's been useful to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Lydia. This was very interesting. I was clicking away on several different types of generational things that were going on. And I do have a screen comment. Very useful information. Great for segment 2 of the course. Ooh, good comment, Miss Judy. Do I have anybody who wants to ask a question or make a comment to Lydia? You can hit the little hand. You can raise your hand on the board there under attendees, and I will see it and unmute you. Or you can type in question or comment like Judy did. Not. I think that you did a very, oh, I did see something. Hold on. Very nice job, Lydia. Well, I'm looking to see who had their hand raised. Oh, it might have been I'm not seeing it right now. It might have came, oh, here we go. All right, I'm loading my board. Another comment. Great job, Lydia. So, very nice for your first time out of the chute, if I can say that. Very good, my dear. Oh, it looks like I did have a question. Hold on. Well, someone else saying very interesting. So, yes, people very much enjoyed the topic, Lydia, and it looks like you gave everybody a lot of information to look at. Especially the royal family. That was a good choice to use the royal family because we all know them. We've seen them in the news, and so you could just see the generational things clicking.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that's why we have archetypes like you choosing Brad Pitt in your talk the other day. It's like, it's shorthand. It's like, okay, we all know you. I don't need to set the ground rules of who this person is. Yet, we may experience them depending on what generation we're in. We may, you know, Diana is my generation, so I'm going to experience her, whereas somebody else may experience William in a very different way because he's their generation. You know? I do have one question, Lydia. We have someone interested. What about sign house placements where it puts the Pluto sign in the opposite house? Any comments on that? Wow.
You know, for instance, Pluto in Scorpio, but in the second house.
Right. So then we've really got that polarity that we've got to live, don't we? And I often feel like when I see that, and Kim Marie, obviously, you might be able to answer it much better than I could, but this idea that that person may have been playing with that polarity in recent past lives.
Yes.
And so there's already some awareness of it and some experience with that polarity. So they start out sitting in their polarity point. and having to experience both and. Or it may be somebody who's on a fast track and they need to get it both.
Both good points.
Both, but I don't know what you would say about that.
Well, and there would be the lesson of objectivity and lesson of balance. You know, because as each of us go to our polarity point, it's not about leaving the natal signature behind. It is about the metamorphosis of the natal signature. You know, for instance, the Pluto in Scorpio going from codependency to self-empowerment. You know, and then that Scorpio energy is so much more empowering of others as well as self when they get past the Scorpio codependencies.
Yes, and you know, and it could be like, okay, I'm going to go in this lifetime and have a super difficult challenge. I'm going to be that frog in the well stewing in my Scorpio transformational juices. You know, maybe like some of that low, difficult, deep, dark Scorpio stuff. Then they're in that well of rut, of Taurus stuff. Okay, how do I break through both of those conditionings and really transform and then burst out of the well like a geyser so that I can be out in the world and share, you know, my resources and share my ability. I know how to live on my own and I know how to live with you, and I'm going to come out and do both. But there might be some hurdles getting to that point.
And it's reminding me of the Pluto and Libra generation, because I've seen that Pluto Libra in the first house, and I seem to run in, when I see this in clients many times, there's this fear of commitment. They want to they want to be with someone else, and yet that Pluto Libra first house, I really can't go there with you on the deepest levels possible, Pluto.
Yeah,
so
because then they're really living that initiatory, you know, issue of the cardinal sign, really big time. And it's like, how can I relate to you when I don't even know who I am yet? And I'm so instinctual. I feel drawn to you because I'm so acting on instinct because I'm in the first house. But yikes, how do I get off the go point, you know? It's tricky. Can be.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to keep us aware of time. Anybody else? Final comments or questions? Not seeing anything come up. So, Miss Lydia, thank you very much. Very, very nice information.
Oh, it's my huge pleasure. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and have a good rest of the conference. Thanks, Kimmery and Leroy. Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. We'll see everybody in 1 hour. In 1 hour, we're going to have Ginny Rodrigo on differentiation of self, the nodal axis coming up in Libra Aries.